the July 11, 2024, adoption of the controversial resolution by the United Nations General Assembly to establish the International Day of Reflection and Remembrance of the Srebrenica Massacre highlights the ongoing global effort to confront and remember atrocities that mark human history. This resolution not only commemorates the victims, but also reflects the way societies define and respond to moral wrongdoing, reinforcing how human social norms evolve and influence our understanding of good, evil, right, and wrong. Moral norms and the assessment of behavior. Human social norms define good and evil by evaluating behavior based on its severity, frequency, and impact. When considering atrocities like the Srebrenica massacre, where over 8,000 Bosnian Muslims were systematically killed, the severity of the crime is obvious. This tragic event is an example of extreme violence targeting a specific group, reflecting the most severe breach of moral and human rights norms. Such actions are evaluated not only for their immediate harm, but for their long-lasting effects on the affected community, on peace, and on international stability. Frequency also plays a role in assessing the moral weight of actions. While isolated crimes are condemned, repeated or systematic behavior, such as genocide, carries greater moral weight due to its sustained and deliberate nature. In cases like Srebrenica, the frequency of violent acts committed within the larger context of the Bosnian War amplifies the global condemnation and the demand for accountability. Finally, the impact of the behavior, whether it is limited to a small group or affects entire populations, further defines its moral weight. The broader the scope of the wrongdoing, the greater the consequences for both the perpetrators and society at large. In cases like Srebrenica, the impact extended beyond individual victims, contributing to the destabilization of the Balkans and leaving a lasting scar on the region. Accountability and differentiated punishments. Because human society evaluates actions based on severity, frequency, and impact, the consequences and punishments for similar behaviors often vary. In international justice systems, those who commit atrocities like genocide are held accountable according to their level of involvement and responsibility. For instance, high-ranking officials who planned or orchestrated the Srebrenica massacre were prosecuted by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, or ICTY, and given more severe punishments, while lower-level participants faced different consequences. This differentiated approach to punishment reflects the broader moral principle that accountability should be proportional to the harm caused. A leader who initiates or enables widespread atrocities bears a greater moral burden than a lower-ranking official acting under orders. This system of justice helps ensure that those responsible for the most significant wrongs are held to a higher standard of accountability, recognizing the broader consequences of their actions. The role of historical acknowledgement in advancing society. Acknowledging historical atrocities like Srebrenica is crucial for societal advancement. It is through reflection and acknowledgement of past wrongs that societies develop and refine their moral norms. By establishing an International Day of Reflection and Remembrance, the international community signals its commitment to recognizing the true history of such events and ensuring that the lessons of the past are not forgotten. This acknowledgement serves as both a form of justice for the victims and a reminder to future generations of the consequences of unchecked violence and hatred. In this sense, societies progress by confronting their past, learning from it, and ensuring that similar behavior is not repeated. By recognizing both the perpetrators and the victims, human society reinforces the values of justice, accountability, and moral responsibility. Voluntary and forced. Representation of elites. The distinction between Western democracies and other political systems lies not in whether they serve the elites, but in how they do so. Both Western democracies and authoritarian regimes tend to operate in ways that benefit their social elites. Yet, the methods by which they claim to represent the people differ significantly. In Western democracies, elites often rise to power through a voluntary political process, which, while influenced by wealth and power, still provides citizens with a choice in their leadership through elections. This system, at least in theory, allows for some level of accountability and public participation, creating a mechanism where elites must justify their policies in the name of the public good. In contrast, authoritarian or coercive political systems tend to impose leadership on the population without their voluntary consent. The elites in these systems operate without checks and balances from the people, relying on force, repression, or manipulation to maintain power. Citizens in such systems are often deprived of the right to choose their representatives, making the elites' rule an extension of coercion rather than a reflection of popular will. This difference in representation, voluntary versus forced, profoundly affects how justice and accountability are administered in each society. In voluntary systems, there is a possibility for historical acknowledgement, legal recourse, and public reflection on events like the Srebrenica massacre. In coercive systems, this process is often stifled, with history being rewritten or obscured to serve the interests of the ruling elite. Conclusion: a dual standard of representation and accountability. In summary, human social norms define good and evil, right and wrong, through the evaluation of actions based on severity, frequency, and impact. This assessment guides how society punishes different behaviors, leading to varied consequences depending on the scope of the actions. Historical acknowledgement, as seen with the United Nations recognition of the Srebrenica massacre, plays a vital role in societal advancement by confronting the truth of past atrocities and shaping moral standards for the future. The difference between Western democracies and other political systems lies in the nature of representation. While both systems often serve the interests of the elite, democracies do so under the premise of voluntary representation, offering citizens the right to choose their leaders. In contrast, authoritarian systems force leadership upon the people without their consent. This distinction influences how societies address historical wrongs, with democratic systems more likely to engage in reflection and accountability, while coercive systems often suppress or manipulate history to maintain their grip on power.